In today's podcast, I want to talk to you about reality, about the experience of reality that we have, about my experience of reality. Because when I was growing up, I was told that reality is something that happens out there, that we interact with it, that it's fixed. But as I've got older and I've asked more questions and I've learned more things, I found that my experience of reality is that it's much more fluid. It has more plasticity to it. It responds to things like belief, intention, focus. I've also come to realize that energy, matter, and consciousness do appear to be all one thing, that the universe appears to be self aware. In this podcast today, I'll be speaking to Dawn Lester, who's co author of the book, What Really Makes You Ill. And what you may not realize is that in 2010, she also wrote a book called The Nature of Reality, co authored with David Parker again, under the pen name of N.O.R. And it's in that context that I asked Dawn to come onto this show. She has a wealth of knowledge to share. And I had some questions I wanted to ask because my experience has been broadly similar to the experience she's had. She's refined what she's learned from that book over the last 14 years. And I'm delighted that I'm able to bring her onto the show and share that with you. So you might want to get comfortable and perhaps pay attention if this butts up against any beliefs that you have, just to examine whether the beliefs are accurate, whether they're actually your beliefs, or whether they've been given to you by somebody else for their own gain. I hope you enjoy this as much as I did. We had a really good time, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye. Dawn, it's a real pleasure to see you again.
It's a real pleasure to have another conversation with you, Adrian. They're always fascinating.
Yeah, twice in 2 days, eh?
What's the saying? We'll have to stop meeting like this or something?
I hope not. I wanted to talk to you today about the nature of reality and about, do we really know what reality is? And I wonder if you might help me expand upon that. Because you've written a book, haven't you?
Yes. The book was published in 2010. It was published under our pen name of N.O.R. And I've learned a lot in the past 14 years.
Yeah.
And not to say that what we've written is wrong. I don't mean that at all. It's just, expanded my understanding and been able to put it into practice and to see the relevance of various previous experiences I've had in my life and put them into a different context, and to be able to understand more where I am, what I'm doing, what I can do. Because for me, the purpose of this physical reality, this realm, this being in this form, is to learn what we can do, how it works, and where it starts from, which is from ourselves, or should I say from each of us, because we each create our own personal experiences. And that's not to say we don't have similar experiences, and this is where it gets difficult when we're talking about other people and their experiences. And I mean, even from a very simple point of view, from the straightforward perspective of, even if we can have you and I have discussions and we have a lot in common and our personal experiences are different. They would never be the same. And at one point I was having conversations with people about how we could do control experiments on the kind of health thing, because they never take our thoughts and ideas, our sort of consciousness into their kind of paradigm when they're doing health stuff. And I said, well, the only way to truly test something is to clone yourself. And even at that point of cloning, just in that first moment of cloning, that's when there would be identical experiences, but from then on they would then be different experiences anyway. So there is no repetition, there is no there are no exact copies, in the same way that even identical twins aren't the same. So nobody has the same experiences, and from the perspective of the ultimate creator, if you like. I mean, there are various names that people use. So there's, I like all that is, because it's all encompassing rather than a label that seems to be attached to something that's separate. That there is, from that perspective of all there is, all that is that why repeat why have an exact repeat of something? Because you're not learning or you the experience. Why repeat an exact repeat of an experience? So there are times when we might feel, oh, this is happening again, only it won't be exactly the same. There will be subtle differences, so it's not repeat. So I mean, it's such a wide topic. I know I kind of
Well,
like
let
gone
me
to
start you off with some questions.
Sorry,
let me start you off with some questions.
Yes, that's probably a good way, because kind of like what reality is like, to be honest, there's a lot we don't know, and from this perspective we'll never know. And again, it depends what we mean by knowing. So that's
okay. All right, well, let me start with this. How do we perceive our reality? It's through our senses, isn't it?
Yes. And at the same time, saying perceive suggests that it's out there in the first place for us to perceive. So it's
well, let's just come back to that. Let me just finish off that thought just 1 second. The idea of the thought there was that you've got things like sight, touch, taste, smell.
Yes.
The challenge is that our sensory receptors, our vibratory decoders, they're limited. So we don't see the full spectrum of light. We don't smell the full spectrum of smell. We don't hear the full spectrum of sound. Like, you can't hear a dog whistle, but dogs hear it. As you get older, you hear less frequencies than young ones, that kind of thing. Insects see more of the visible range than we do, like ultraviolet and stuff. So we're not getting a full perception of what's actually going on because we're not able to receive it. We're not able to decode it because the equipment we have for reading it isn't broad enough. So that alone says there's a lot more going on than we're actually aware of.
Absolutely. And it is not, I mean, yes, what we experience through the five senses is limited. And it's not kind of, oh, it's limited, it's a bad thing. It's because if you imagine that we were able
to impossible.
hear, see, smell, taste, it's like everything, it would be a completely different experience. It wouldn't be the kind of human experience that we have. And it would be very different. So it is a particular set of limitations that allow us to experience life in a certain way. I mean, there are two aspects. So knowing that there are sort of other frequencies that we don't access shows us that there's more than we can access, that what we can sort of perceive and know through our senses. So that's a good way of saying, well, there's more going on, as you said. So we're told that, we're very limited and machine-like and all that kind of stuff. And that gives us the opening to say, well, no, there's a lot more going on. And there's more that we can access, not necessarily through our five senses, but through other faculties. And they're the ones that we're not encouraged to use. Only most of us know that we have other faculties, and especially intuition, that knowing, that inner knowing. So we have those limitations in a way, so we can have this experience in this physical realm, if you like. And it's not as limited as we're made to believe. So we can do more, loads more. That's what I believe what this experience is about, is to learn who we are, what we can do. And that's why the last few years have been so crazy, kind of trying to restrict us, because then suddenly kind of we go, oh no, we've got to do something different. And so we're learning who we are, what we are, and what we can do.
Okay. I think one of the other challenges in any kind of discussion like this as well is that we're trying to describe concepts that aren't familiar, trying to use familiar language, and we may not even have the words to describe the concepts. I get feelings about things, and I think, I wish I had the ability to voice what I'm feeling, but I just don't yet.
Yes, I understand entirely. And again, our language is limited
Yeah.
for us. You know, that's also intentional through the indoctrination system called school.
Yes.
Oh, yes, yes. I mean, that's all to limit us and stop
Yeah.
us recognizing and becoming what we're capable of becoming, because, you know, once people know who they are, what they are, and what they can do, you know, the control system's over.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
So we, and at the same time, there are limitations because our language is based within space and time type context.
Yes.
And so it's finding these new words or new ways of languaging. So again, this is again something else I'm moving into, is how we are in fact limiting ourselves through our language.
Yeah.
And so we either develop new words, or we express ourselves as openly as possible, so that we can convey the, like you were saying, convey the concept, even if we haven't got a complete language
Yes.
to describe it in or explain it in these very, very specific words.
Yes.
And so we say enough and hope that that people are able to feel it for themselves, and so they can understand without necessarily having the exact words that describe it. So you kind of conveying something that they pick up energetically, telepathically, through the other kind of through the other faculty, well, you know, mainly through intuition. And as more and more of us are kind of opening up to that, we are connecting in that way.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Bill. And there's so much more information going between you. It's not just the words. There's a whole different thing going on as well. That's much bigger. The words, I think, are just a small portion of it.
Yes, yes, it is. Um, it is knowing that there's so much more, and to us, who we are, what we are, and we are communicating in those more expanded states of consciousness. And it's you know, some people say telepathy is, you know, reading somebody else's thoughts. It's not quite that. It's connecting, because again, you know, thoughts aren't in our brain, so it's not that we're mind reading. That's not what telepathy is. It's more tuning in to the other person, the other people you're talking to, sort of tuning in to the bigger perspective, because we are not just this physical body. We have our torus field, you know, the magnetic field that surrounds our electrical system, and a lot of information is within that field. And if you are open to that, you know, you can, and again, it's because it's frequencies and resonance, and where you resonate with people, you know, and then you have similar kind of conversations. So again, it's as you said, I'm doing my best to use words when I know the words aren't exactly conveying the full expression of my understanding. I'm hoping to convey the concept, so that people will pick up and go, oh yes, you know, that there's something that feels right. There's a, I mean, I in one of my recent workshops, I think it was a Q&A, I was somebody had asked me some questions, and I was giving some sort of answers, explaining, and they said that they understood more than just the words I was saying. So, you know, we are picking up on each other. And it was actually, it was a really interesting question of the difference between thought and emotion, where thought and emotion comes from. And to be honest, they probably come from the same place. They're just different expressions of our us and sort of consciousness. So sometimes, you know, we work with thought, and other times we work with an intuitive knowing. And I know that's how I work. Sometimes I just you know, I have that knowing, and that's what intuition is. It's kind of knowing without knowing how you know it.
That happens to me a lot.
Mm.
as we've had discussions about.
These, this is something that I think a lot more people are being aware of. I mean, people have different languages. Sometimes people say, oh, you know, they have a download, or they have whatever it is, and that's great, because we're all working or functioning in different ways, and there is no right way. Oh, you know, this is the way to do something. It's, you know, we recognize who we are, and we have different ways of understanding things, learning things, you know. And again, you know, through all these different systems that we know, you know, like the human design, you know, we know we are, each of us is unique.
Yes.
You know, each one of us is unique, and there is no reason for anyone to be the same as someone else. Well, you know, like I was saying before, what would be the point of what would be, it's not the point, what would be the
Well, there'd be no growth and
growth?
expansion with that.
That's, yes, that was it. There's kind of, there's no expansion of knowledge, there's no expansion of understanding, there's nothing new to learn. And this is all about, you know, learning, experiencing, trying things out, and working with how our emotions and our thoughts and our belief systems. And one of the things is, you know, as more and more people have been finding out the last few years, it's more about unlearning what we've been indoctrinated with, and getting rid of the layers and layers of limiting beliefs. And then we start recognizing who we are from, if you like, from the inside out.
Yes.
And then we start learning what we can do, because we're coming from a place of love. We're coming from our true nature. So we're coming from growth and love and expansion and learning. And so, you know, that's how we learning to interact. And more things happen, more and more wonderful things happen.
I have another question for you. Earlier on, when we were talking about the five senses, and you were going to head off in a direction about perceiving, which implies something, could you expand upon that thought?
Yes, there's we have the impression that there is a world out there that we're interacting with, that it's there and we're perceiving it. And
there's no proof of that.
No, there isn't, and that's the point. It is from our perspective in this physical reality that is how we function, that's how we interact. It's to realize that it isn't a, you know, solid physical world, and that's where a lot of where we're learning about science and how things aren't the way we've been told. That's now all sort of falling apart and crumbling, which is great, because it's then allowing us to realize that is not solid and separate out there, you know. It's, and at the same time, that's the appearance, because that's how we interact. In terms of the way to describe this is a particular state of consciousness. And a good analogy is like the dream state. You know, people have dreams. So, and it's, sometimes we think it's us, you know, this kind of, you know, it's like Dawn having a dream, whereas it's more the expanded consciousness that focuses as Dawn in this physical state of consciousness, that then when we go to sleep, we, you know, there's a withdrawal from this state of consciousness into the dream state, where the restrictions are much more open, or there are fewer restrictions. And so we have all kinds of experiences, and we can jump from different places, and there are similarities. So you can have very similar experiences of, you know, going through sort of a certain landscape. So you can have landscapes, you can meet people, you can have similar experiences to here, only there's something that is less
more fluid, it seems to me.
Yes, it's more yes, I was going to say, I'm trying to go less, it's not less, it's more fluid, more open, more, and you can kind of jump around. And sometimes when you wake up, you think, well, how did that part of the dream, jump into that part, and it moved all over the place. So so it's more fluid. That's a better way of putting it, that it's more open. So it's just a different way of
And
experience.
it can have a massive effect on your biochemistry and your body too. You can have a nightmare and you can wake up terrified, your heart rate's up, you're sweating, all sorts are going on in response to what's going on wherever it's going on. It's not physically happening to you, but you're having a physical response. So it is physically happening to you.
Yes, and there's a parallel with this kind of reality, is that we can create all kinds of physical responses from things that aren't necessarily real,
Hmm.
that we can believe are happening. So
Yeah.
all that's why the last few years has
Yeah.
been based on trying to get people fearful, so
Yeah.
that they get themselves into that state. They have those reactions. They
Yeah.
then create all kinds of symptoms that they've read about that they're supposed to have because of XYZ that's going on.
Yeah.
And so they can then create those symptoms in the body. So yes,
That
it's
wouldn't be a nocebo effect, would it?
well, yes it is. I just have a concern about these, placebo, nocebo,
Yes.
because I think they're interpreted in a way that can just go, oh, they're just, so it's sort of dismissed as, oh, well, it's just. No, it's actually very real, and it
Mm.
shows us what we can do.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, so the dream state is more fluid. At the same time,
Well, if
you
that's
are
the case, then, Dawn, what's to say that this isn't just another dream state?
well, that's the point. It's another state of consciousness
Yeah.
that can be likened to the dream state, and at the same time, it's not to dismiss this as being, and that's what a lot of people do. Oh, well, it's just, it's physical. It's not important. It's, a lower state of being. No, it's a very important
Yeah.
part of learning what we do, who we are, what we can do,
Hmm.
what we're about, and they just not just they are all different states whereby we can learn
Hmm.
about what we can do. So I mean, in a dream state, people have lucid dreaming,
Hmm.
where they can then take control over what is happening.
I do that a lot.
And this state of consciousness can be uh, experienced using the same processes
Hmm.
of understanding who we are, setting intentions and ideas, and becoming lucid here in this
Hmm.
uh, waking state of consciousness,
Yeah.
appearing to be physical reality. And at the same time, I'm not diminishing it. This is a very important state of reality. It's not one to be escaped from, to be
Yeah.
moved away from. It's a lower state. There's a lot of that
Well, I remember
that
reading
people
once
think.
that it helped me understand it better to say that the experience is very real, even if the reality itself isn't.
Yes, it's the reality doesn't function in the way we've been taught. It's not a physical place in
Yeah.
just in the same way that the uh, matter isn't physical, little billiard balls, the way we're told, the kind of, how the
Hmm.
the atom works. That's not in that way. And so the experience is absolutely, and that's what's important, our experiences within our own reality. I know there's a lot of, you create your own reality stuff,
Mm.
and I think that can maybe be a little confusing. So I think understanding you are responsible for your own experiences,
Mm.
it is a much clearer way of putting it, and that's the way I've been moving my language,
Yeah.
because then you can understand your own experiences
Yeah.
and what you can do about them.
Yeah.
And it's also not to say, just because you don't like a particular experience, that it's bad, or you've done something wrong, or you've made a mistake.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing, that the indoctrination system is, you're either right or you're wrong. And it's
Yeah.
not about right and wrong. It's about understanding the experience and why we have certain experiences.
I think for me, it's about experiencing and learning what my preferences are. And I've learned a long time ago, and it's always been reinforced that I actually get a better idea of what I want to have happen by experiencing the things I don't want to have happen. So the negative defines what I want in the positive, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes, and I agree. I mean, I've seen, when I was growing up, it kind of, there was a lot of anger around the family,
Yeah.
and that taught me that isn't a pleasant way of experiencing life,
No.
because there's sort of fired out at other people. And again, it's understanding, because then when you do that, you hurt other people, and of course,
Mm-hmm.
why would you want to do that? Because again, from a voluntarist perspective, we grant freedom. Everyone has the freedom to do what they want, as long as they don't hurt someone else. So I
Yes.
kind of I do my best to operate from that where I can. And so I it's that perspective of not doing to somebody what you wouldn't want them to do to you.
Yeah. I've read that energy, matter, and consciousness are the same thing. Would you agree with that?
Yes, that's Amit Goswami from the
Yeah.
Self-Aware Universe, I
That's
believe.
right. Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
yes.
Fascinating book.
Yes, it is. Yes, especially because even though he's a physicist, he's got that background as being in. I can't remember if he was Buddhist, but certainly from that more, should we say, sort of spiritual understanding. So marrying the two, and in fact, I think somebody some while ago said that most quantum physicists end up being mystics, because they get, and I'm not saying that quantum physics is useful, only in the context that it's the more they've looked at trying to look for the basic fundamental particles of matter, they can't find it. So for me, that's useful, but the rest of it is just theoretical equations that have very little
Mm-hmm.
meaning. So I'm not saying I'm a supporter of quantum physics as such. It just has its uses to
Yeah.
show that there's no fundamental kind of physical matter,
Yeah.
and that could be scary for some people.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, it's actually, once you kind of sit with it, it's actually incredibly empowering. It's totally freeing, because you then know, you are able to create your own experiences, and then you start learning
Mm-hmm.
how to.
Yeah.
And that's an ongoing process. There is no, oh, got it, tick that box, that's sorted, because
Yep.
it's an ongoing journey, and it's a learning process, and it's fascinating,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a completely different way of looking at what happens to you in your life, what you are doing, and it's recognizing that you're responsible.
Mm.
And again, that's also, I guess, like everything's just inverted, isn't it, the way we're
Mm.
taught?
Yeah.
Because we're taught not to be selfish.
Yep.
Oh, don't think of yourself. Well, if you don't think of yourself, then you know what experiences are you having if you're always looking after other people?
Yeah.
I mean, even from a very practical sense, you have to be able to look after people. You have to look after
Mm-hmm.
yourself. Otherwise, you really can't. You're
Yep.
not in a position to be able to do that
Yep.
from that very ordinary perspective.
Yeah.
At the same time, if you're expecting other people to be a certain way, if you haven't sorted out your own inner stuff,
Mm-hmm.
like really look at what beliefs you've got,
Mm-hmm.
what ideas you've got, what you think, who you think you are, what you think you can do. So I mean, it's, say, limiting. That's, I suppose, really the limiting beliefs. But again, the word belief has a couple of meanings. People kind of like, oh, well, it's just, you just believe it. It doesn't mean it's true. Whereas a belief is, it's something more than that. It's so.
Well, you've got three, as I know it, you've got an opinion, which is just, it's a pretty floaty thing. It doesn't have any kind of real support to it. Excuse me one sec. You have an opinion, and then you have a belief, which is like a tabletop, and it has reference legs on it of experiences you've had that make you support the idea that this is true. So it's you think it's true, and then you have a certainty or a conviction, and that's got these kind of massive like tree trunks that hold it up. Yeah, so that's because I'm always asking myself, what do I have to believe to be true about this in order to feel the way I feel? Because I know that my beliefs determine what I feel. That's one of the aspects of that. And I'm asking that question constantly. I also then go the other way and say, well, what do I have to believe to be true if I was to be able to do this right now? So I want to say, is there a belief that's in the way that I can get rid of and put a more empowering one in that then opens the door up? Because we don't lack, Tony Robbins said this, we don't lack resources, we lack resourcefulness. And your beliefs are one of the things that stand in the way of you accessing your resourcefulness, much like your emotional state.
Yes, I think the difference between belief and certainty is helpful, because sometimes what we call beliefs are more certainties,
Mm-hmm.
as in knowing certain things,
Yes. Yeah.
they're certainties.
Yeah.
And a lot of them are beliefs. I think most of the time, the beliefs that are more in that kind of open, well, maybe even they may even be opinions,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing that they are changeable
Yeah.
is one of the things that helps to actually start the ability to change them. Because,
Yeah.
as you say, it's if you if people are sitting with a set of beliefs
Yeah.
that they absolutely are hanging on to, that
Mm-hmm.
are limiting their experiences,
Yeah.
then they are, they're going to struggle to to change their experiences,
Oh,
because
yeah.
they've got these beliefs, and that they will not
Yeah.
shift them, they will not change them. They've made them into certainties,
Yeah.
and even though they're not certainties, because they aren't true.
Yeah,
And
and
again,
they can be local inside you, but they can also be global beliefs about a society, about a country, about an industry, about an event. You've got all these kind of different levels of them as well that are affecting everything you do and shaping how your experience is.
yes, and you can most often hear people's belief systems when you hear them, when you have a conversation with them. You can hear
Yeah,
what they're saying about, other countries, people, this, that, and the other, and you
yeah.
think,
Well, it's I am, this is, they are, it is. They're all kind of definitions of those things, aren't they?
Yes, and at the same time, there is no fixed
Yeah,
uh, um, anything that can be a, it is, they are.
yeah,
It's just that when they have that as a certainty, that this is,
yeah,
I am, then that is how they'll experience things. I mean,
yeah,
even with emotions, if you start saying, this is something I've sort of been thinking about. If you say, I am angry, then hold. I mean, if you feel the emotion that you then call anger,
yeah,
and you then say, I am angry, you are going to hang on to that.
yeah. Oh, yeah,
Whereas if you can recognize there is an emotion, you and find a way to distance yourself from it in terms of how you describe that,
hmm,
then you're no longer hanging on to that as an identity,
hmm,
and you can feel the emotion. And at the same time, it's actually giving that emotion a label
hmm.
that just is a temporary description of something that you're feeling. And it's emotion, and emotions ride in waves, so they're
Yeah,
not fixed.
yeah,
But if you're saying, I am angry, you are hanging on to it, and you
yeah.
are making it into a more
Well, it's
than it
becoming an
necessarily.
emotional home for you. And a lot of people have go-to emotional homes because those emotional homes actually meet their needs.
Well, yes, there are reasons that people
Yeah,
will hang on to those emotions. They will hang on to
yeah,
those labels, and they attach some kind of narrative to it, so that there's a whole story
yeah,
that means something to them.
yeah,
And it's learning that we actually can, and in many cases, no, I won't say should, is up to people what they do, but hanging on to that isn't always beneficial for having a different kind of experience.
yeah.
At the same time, so emotions. Um, is there a noise that you can hear
No,
in the background here? Okay, it's just they've decided to start cutting the grass
no,
outside.
the noise cancelling on Zoom's pretty good.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
It's also with, with what's been going on the last few years of health situations, has brought that much more to the fore, that
Yeah,
people have a way of describing their sets of symptoms and giving it a label and say, I've got,
yes,
and so they make it part of their identity.
yes.
And so, and that again feeds all kinds of needs, whether it's for attention or significance or those kinds of things. So, I mean, yes, there are needs.
Certainty, love, connection. Yeah. Yeah.
Yes, yes, connection, and again, people's
Yeah.
need for attention and care, and those kinds of things. So, it's not saying again that's bad. It's
Yeah.
just showing how when we have that kind of languaging and we have those ways of expressing ourselves, they are the experiences we're going to carry on having.
Yeah.
So that's why when people have those belief systems and that kind of language, and then they keep it as if it's a certainty,
Yeah.
then they'll keep having that experience. And it's really, and that's their choice. It's just showing that that isn't necessarily how things have to remain if you're not happy with those particular circumstances.
Well, my take on that, Dawn, is that you are running a particular pattern, and
Yes.
that pattern is, excuse me, is getting you to a specific end result. So you can run a different pattern. I'm always saying to myself, and it doesn't happen very often anymore, but if I find myself getting in a particular direction emotionally, I don't want to go, I can say, hang on a sec, I'm just running a pattern. What created the pattern? What am I doing physically? What am I doing with my thoughts? What am I focused on? And what meanings am I giving things? And then I can start to break the thing apart really quickly before it gets a hold of me and changes my experience.
Yes, patterns, habits,
Yeah.
we can get into habits and then wonder why things don't
Yeah.
change. And that's because we keep doing the
Yeah.
same things.
That's right.
And it's recognizing, I mean, there are some habits that are good, kind
Yeah.
of going out and about, getting some sunshine, getting some exercise,
Oh, yeah.
those sorts of things. It's when we're fixated on carrying on doing them
Yeah.
and hanging on to the habit and then
Yeah.
wondering why things won't change.
When I'm going to take a slightly different direction now, and that is, could you talk about remote viewing? Because that really, for some people, blows their mind apart in terms of how reality really works. The CIA know how important it is because they continue to use it. The military continue to use it, as far as I know. Could you talk a little bit about remote viewing, please?
Yes, they were using it in the 70s, and um, uh, we all could. Well, we all have the faculty. It's a question of whether we develop it or not.
Yeah.
There are some people who managed to develop it really well, and they were able to see some venues, some events, certain locations, just through being given some map coordinates. So they're able to actually, some people say, project their consciousness at the same time, because space isn't quite, time and space aren't quite how we think they are. That
No.
it's just really being able to focus attention on those coordinates, what those coordinates would represent in this reality, and they would be able to see the location, see any buildings that were there, see people, be able to learn what was going on in that location, and obviously then tell people what was happening. I mean, it's said that the Americans and Russians spied on each other, and again, yeah, maybe one. So it has been used and I'm sure is still being used, because it is tuning into a different location. So again, it's usually you kind of have to remove your focus of attention from here and focus and have a real certainty that you can connect to that location and know what's going on. So again, they've been able to then bring back information. So if there were, certain activities going on that were, I don't know, sort of troop deployment or whatever it was that was happening in a location. One of the interesting, trying to recall all of the details, one of the interesting that that information was brought back and is, oh no, that doesn't sound right. And they thought the person had made a mistake. Only what happened is that they were viewing exactly the right location. It's just that they had a different time scale. So it was I
And by
believe.
time scale, you mean it could be years or decades apart?
Yes. So sorry, not time scale, time frame.
Time
So
frame, yeah.
it was some, I think it had been some decades earlier, something that had been there but was no longer there, because they were saying, well, that's not there. And then go, well, that's what I can see. So maybe the map location wasn't sufficient. They should have given a date, which I think is, even more just fascinating, because it's not just that, it's not just space, it's time as well. So kind of the idea of time travel. Well, again, because everything is, and then going back to the matter, energy and consciousness, because everything is energy, and consciousness is used to experience the energy in different forms. But time isn't a fixed, it isn't fixed either. And so that's how people tune into other timelines and sort of historic, quite often historical. I mean, usually sort of going back in, if you like, into history, because people think the future doesn't exist either. And
it all exists.
It all exists now. And that's, again, it's
Well, it is an interesting thing that it helped me to think about it this way, that you think about space and like you've got coordinates like you talked about, but to me, time is just another coordinate.
Yes.
So if you throw the time coordinate in there, time travel no longer becomes a problem, because you're simply tuning to a vibratory coordinate of location and time. And then you would cease to be here and you would naturally exist there, because that's where your focus is. That's what you're experiencing. You're no longer here.
Yes, and that's why, you couldn't.
And by the way, I don't know how you do that, but that's the thought process that I'm stuck on right now.
Oh, yes, I agree. I mean, that's how it would work if you wanted to explore remote viewing in that way, and also to recognize that it is time as well as space. So it is the you would want to include the time stamp as well as the location coordinates. So and that's and again, saying because everything exists now, that may make people think, well, there's nothing, there's nothing new to do, because if it all exists, then what are we here for? But that's misunderstanding, because it's,
well, that actually leads me to something, because you talked about, if it does all exist now, so you can choose different timelines into the future by altering your behavior now. We're familiar with that concept, but that concept should, if that rule's true, which I think it is, should work in reverse, that you should be able to pick different timelines, which leads me on to a really interesting topic called the Mandela Effect. Would you like to talk about that?
Well, yes, I only came across it fairly recently. I'm just trying to think. It was Brian Staveley's interview on Alpha Vedic, I think. And at first I was a little skeptical, but when you come across something new for the first time, it's always
it
a good.
butts up against your beliefs.
Well, it's just like, oh, okay. One or two of the things, it was like, no, I mean, they were just minor. It's like, well, that's not right. And then I thought, just don't focus on the things that don't look right, because one of the Mandela effects is to do with the thinker,
your book,
and the image that we use, because and not just on the book, is because when I first joined Facebook in, I believe it's 2009, I used the thinker image as my profile picture. I didn't put my own face, I just used that, because, and I thought that was a good representation of what I was about, because I was thinking, sort of critical thinking. So I thought, oh, that was a good image for me. So way back, and I know that it was the fist on the forehead, not the fist on the chin, which now exists almost everywhere. And so, okay, the Mandela effect is that there are things that have changed. And it's not just because somebody said, oh, well, we would just, well, we don't like that fist, we'll just change it. It's not just having a new way of looking at something. shifts everything in the past to this new way, so that people, well, it used to be, you know, we know it used to be, and of course part of the problem with this is that, you know, people then start questioning their own memory.
Yeah.
So it's really good when a lot of people have had the same memory and then say, no, okay, we remember this.
Yeah, I mean, the examples that spring to mind are things like the cornucopia on the Fruit of the Loom logo that either was there or isn't there. The spectacles on the Monopoly game.
I was going to say the Monopoly board. Yes.
Yeah, so things like that. And then I heard a recent one, which was in Star Wars, where C-3PO was all one color as opposed to having a different colored leg. It's like, you know, and you look at it and you think, and it's an interesting thing, which suggests to me that we're now no longer focused on that timeline as the past. We're focused on this timeline that we're experiencing as the past.
Yes, I also think that it is helping us all shift our understanding of this reality. And that's, I think that's a point that Brian Staveley has made. So I'll, you know, this isn't my idea, this is from him, and I think he's right, is that it's none of these changes are malevolent, are they?
No.
You know, none of them are being uncomfortable. You know, I mean, okay, it's a shift of memory. You go, oh, I remember it differently. Nothing is being imposed on us from a, you know, that kind of perspective of being a problem, say a problem. And so it seems more likely to be from, if you like, a sort of benevolent force that is helping us just say, yeah, no, things can shift. And also, the helpful part, the really beneficial part from my perspective, is because of what's gone on and what's still going on about how things are going to be, we are going to be controlled, we are going to be this, we are going, and again, when people say, oh, we are going to be, this is going to happen, they're putting it into effect. And I think this is a way of showing us that no, it doesn't have to, things can just change. And I mean, I always say, you know, okay, there is an agenda, but that doesn't mean to say it's going to, you know, their plans are going to happen.
It doesn't have to be your agenda, but I think because energy flows where focus goes.
Yes.
That what we focus on, they're so desperate to get us to focus on it, because I think at their level, whoever's level that might be, how high up that might go, I don't know. I've got some ideas, but they know that if they can get you to focus on something, that becomes your experience.
Yes.
That's the reality that you create for yourself. So that's what they have to get so many people focused on, which is what the media is all about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And hence the Bernays book called Propaganda back in 1928.
Yes.
You know, it's the conscious manipulation of the masses.
Yeah.
And they're doing it through getting us to believe, or trying to get us to believe what they want us to believe. And so that's why the belief system, our ideas, our thoughts, and our language and what we say, because as you say, you know, the kind of when everyone's saying, oh, you know, they're going to do this. So even the so-called alternative media that's supposed to be telling us the truth, they're still putting out some fear porn, which again gets people to believe, oh, well, it's not that bad narrative, it's this bad narrative. And you go, well, just hang on a minute. What experience do you want? Do you want, you know, and it's to understand that we are more, well, we are responsible for all our experiences.
Yes.
And it's how we think, how we believe, how we speak, how we act in accordance with, you know, what they want or what we want. And when we start learning that we are creating our own experiences. So I think, yes, that's the creating our own experiences rather than creating our own reality. It's because the reality is not, you know, we don't create the reality from this perspective. So again, with it's trying to use analogies, and I've been trying to think of analogies, you know, all sorts. I mean, there are different ones, and again, as with all analogies, you just don't take them too far.
Yeah.
But if you take, like, for, a tree, so the trunk of the tree is, it's just one trunk of the tree, and all the branches and leaves and everything else, they just spread out, and they're each one of them in a different space and time, and having a different experience, and all that information is then transmitted back to the trunk. The trunk experiences all its leaves and branches and twigs and flowers and fruit and everything else. And they're all expressions of tree. So we are all expressions of all that is in our experiences, the way we choose, the choices we make. And again, it's trying not to think of, bad and wrong, because again, that's how we've been made to sort of limit ourselves, and to recognize our experiences. Everything, oh, didn't like that one.
Like I said before about preference.
Exactly. You say, oh, didn't like that. So what, and to recognize that it's not because somebody else did something horrible to you, it's that experience is for you. A particular experience is an opportunity for you to learn something about yourself.
Yes. Yep. Definitely.
And that's how we grow. That's how we learn. And sorry, excuse me. So that requires us to spend some time, if that kind of experience happens, to, instead of attaching a story and a narrative and it's all out there, to sit with it, feel the emotions, feel the ideas and that come through. And sometimes the thoughts might be helpful, or it's more to try and tune into the intuition, into that part of it, and to then see if you can tune into what's behind that, and try and then realize that there's a thought or a belief or something that is limiting, that's creating that experience. And again, it's not wrong. It's okay, it's an opportunity to learn.
Yeah. And once you've got that, what I do then is, and I found this works well for me, is, all right, now I know what I don't want. What is it that I really want? So that I can get my attention away from where I'm now in a place I'm not comfortable, and back to where I want to head.
Yes. And with creating what you want, is to be more open in the way you describe it, rather than being very fixed, or I want, very very limited kind of, well, it's this, this, and this. Because if you have a more of a concept of what you want, in fairly general terms, if you have a sense of that, and you open up to your experience being the best for you, it might actually be something slightly different, which is not because you got it wrong. It's because that actually is better for you for learning. And quite often, I mean, we've had this conversation, you kind of, something didn't work out, and yet, or appeared to not work out. And if you don't get lost in those details and you sit with it, then something else, it's like one door closes, another opens, and you find that actually, wow, that's even better. And so it's being open. So it's not being just, oh, well, it doesn't matter, whatever happens. That there is, as you say, kind of a good way of putting direction, putting some ideas, putting some thoughts into what you want, but not to be too specific, because that specific thing may actually be limiting you from something that's even more wonderful.
Yeah, I think one of the other things I do when things go wrong, which they do invariably, or not wrong, but they don't go the way you expect them to, and we'll get onto expectation in a minute because that's a key point, is asking myself the question, what did I learn from this, and how does this actually serve me? Even though it doesn't look like it, how is it serving me? Because then I can extract the important information from it so I can move forward.
Yes, and that's the reason for recognizing that these situations are learning opportunities. So it's recognizing what that is,
Well,
and
that's a
how
great belief. Sorry, that's a
serving you.
great belief then, because as you're going through your life, no matter what's going on, you know that it's there to serve you and to help you and to help you grow, and you can learn from it. So your view and your experience become different, because even if it's uncomfortable, painful, unpleasant, and it's not a preference, it's still a value to you, and it's a value to all that is as well, that you're having the experience not on behalf of, with, because you're that, like the tree, you're in this instance, maybe the flower or the bud at the end of the branch into new territory, having that new experience.
Yes. And that then moves it. No, I'm not going to go too far with the tree analogy. So yes, it is in informing all that is in the context of all that is that the stillness, you can't
Language.
language beyond time and space. So language just cannot express the ultimate creator, if you like. I mean, sometimes I say, we're each sparks of the divine, and again, the spark, because it's something enlivened. We are living, we are lively. It's the That's why I like the spark, the idea of a spark. And not everyone likes the idea of the divine. That's why it's kind of like all that is. I mean, different people have preferences, and the idea is really to recognize that we're not here to suffer, and yet if we are, there's something we can learn from it. And again, I'm not denying that people have really tough experiences. I have compassion for people who have tough experiences, and I'm not belittling them in any way, shape, or form. This all of everything that we're all experiencing is all experiences within consciousness.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. So there's a couple of takeaways I have from this that I'd like to maybe to as to how do I use this? How do you use this? How can other people maybe use it if they haven't taken this approach? So for me, focusing only on what I want, because energy flows where focus goes. So focusing only on what I want and really maintaining that focus, even though there's distractions and they want to get my attention on things I don't want. No, stay focused on that. Number one is always come from a place of love, because that's the most powerful one. The other one is, what's your beliefs? What do you believe to be true? And is that going to help you get closer or further away from the things, the experiences you want? The next one is a really big one, is your expectation. And I've learned to use that by writing down the things I want in the positive tense, the current tense, present tense, as if I'm already experiencing them. So it is, I am, we are, they are. So it becomes, it's closer in. I'm not holding it a distance by saying it's some time away. And then taking action, as much action as I can think of, because we live in a physical place. We're experiencing a physical world. So the experience, we have to do physical things. And then the other one is pay attention to the synchronicities and the intuitions and the little things that catch your eye, because they're important and they're very quiet and they're very subtle. Pay attention to them. Those are the kind of things that I've learned, not just from this discussion, but that's been my kind of approach. Do you want to add to that, change it, say what your approach is?
I would say that's excellent way of encompassing and for people to understand just what they can do. Again, with what they want. It's when we have these different sort of thoughts that just pop in and we don't like that thought, it's not to be too hard on ourselves, to to think that you're creating something. It's to recognize that you may still have a fear around something, some kind of emotion, and I think the fear is one of the strongest ones. And I'm not saying that fear has to be got rid of, because there is a place for a certain fear. At the same time, is not to allow the fear to limit what we do. And really the key points to take away is that we are responsible for our own experiences, and not to think that somebody else is responsible. And that's a big shift. And also, it's not just to sit there and say, I want. It's we have to take action, and that's the important part. And that's the way this reality functions. And it isn't somewhere to be to remove ourselves from, to raise ourselves away from, to get away from it from the spiritual perspective. Because this is, it's science and spirit merged in this in this way of being, because this is a way of being. It's a and it's a very important way of being that informs, you know, all that is. You know, this is a very specific way of learning that we understand how we use our beliefs, our thoughts, and what we do with it. And as you say, you know, where we put our energy. And again, it's always to be open to learning something new and open to opportunities and the synchronicities. Once you start kind of getting into the flow, the synchronicities really start happening quite amazingly. And that's what I've found more recently, the opportunities. So for me, I know this works. I mean, it's not
working, Dot. It's just the way it is.
Yes. Well, that's what I mean, to recognize it is the way it is. So it has it's what helped me get through certain parts of my life, knowing that there's a purpose to be here. There was always something telling me there's a purpose, there's a reason. You know, again, these are limiting words, but there's something for me to be doing here. So even though I had some horrible experiences, I got myself through them because I wanted to know. I wanted to know what this is about, and I'm learning. And the more I'm learning, and the opportunities are presenting themselves. And again, it's not about imposing on other people. It's such a fine balance, as you say, of putting the energy out, and the language as well is so important. So it is the present tense of I am. And, you know, even just say, oh, you know, the elite that are controlling us, you go, no. You know, if you start saying they're controlling us, that's what you will experience. So it is really starting from the inside out. And that's and yes, it sounds like it's selfish, but as I said, you've got to start from yourself, recognize where you've got limiting beliefs, recognize where your experiences aren't quite in line with what you would like to experience, and then have that shift, and also to recognize that we may have some inner stuff going on that we might not be accessing as easily. So there are different modalities of learning to see those parts. I mean, again, parts work is one of the ones that I've used to access some of my problem areas that I've been able to release the emotion. Again, it's not to keep, you know, like the talk therapy, you kind of keep going over and over your problems, and that doesn't help. That isn't somewhere. It's to actually release what's behind them, why you are holding on to them, and why you are whether holding on to something is serving you or not, or serving it, because it may be. There may be some protection that's serving you, and then when you're ready, you can release that protective element, and also to recognize that, you know, we're not, you know, singular. That there are many aspects to us that we can bring forth at certain times. Sometimes it's important to be more assertive. Sometimes it's maybe not so important to be assertive. So you know, we kind of, there are different aspects and there are different parts, and you know, we access those parts, you know, when it's their turn to kind of come forward.
Well, we were talking about that yesterday, and how I was explaining to you how I was utilizing that in order to, you know, achieve the things we were achieving in a very short space of time, by calling forth the part of me that knows exactly what to do right now, that's most appropriate in its behavior, thoughts, and beliefs, in order to allow me to access what I wanted. So it's not a passive thing. It's a very focused, this is what I require.
Yes, and to know that it is accessible to you, within you. You know, you kind of, you know, yes, that is there, and it's not always that you have to kind of look outside. Sometimes you do, and that's fine, because we are all different. We've got certain sort of skills, and it's to really know kind of, and I think that was an aspect for me, is how I got through the stuff. It's like, come on, you can do it, you know. It was that, so accessing the strong part, to take over, you know, the assertive part that says, you know, come on, you can do this, you know. So yeah, and there are other times where you kind of, that part doesn't have to be, doesn't have to play
like with me, I had one particular aspect of my personality running the show for 25 years, and it really didn't serve me at all, as I only found out in February this year. And you've seen a very different change in me. Yeah.
Yes, it's amazing. And I think it was probably, I can't, I really should have made a note of the date, that something shifted for me as well, fairly recently. I don't know, maybe it might have been around a similar kind of time. I don't know. I can't remember. It was certainly earlier this year that I definitely felt something shift. And it's amazing just how things flow when you allow them. And it's getting that balance between knowing who you are, what you're doing, and having that confidence without arrogance, you know, the confidence that you can do, and you'll get and if you need some help, something will present itself, you go, oh, okay. So it's having the confidence.
Well, I think it's allowing yourself to express who you really are.
Yes. And in the context of being an aspect of all that is, I mean, we are different for reasons, so that we have different experiences.
Yes.
And so the who I am here to be is becoming more obvious to me as I'm opening up to who I thought I was supposed to be, or who I was trying to be. And yet at the same time, there was always that little inner voice saying something. I mean, it was never clear, but there was always that intuition. Now, intuition is not always a big voice, and sometimes
it's always a quiet one for me.
Always a quiet one. And sometimes the old sort of, you know, see, I pointed the head, it's not really in the head, but the thoughts and the you know, the habits and that kind of stuff, that programming kind of keeps running, and it's sometimes too noisy, which is why it's good to spend time, some downtime. Again, you know, self-care. Take time out to just, you know, look after yourself, whatever it is, you know, take time out of the day. You know, we are not worker bees, you know. We're not meant to be worker bees. That's not what this is about. And it's really recognizing that everything we've been taught has been, you know, is an inversion of who and what we truly are. And that's why there has been this system to stop us from recognizing that. Because when everyone knows how powerful we are, I don't mean powerful in a power over, but when we're powerful for ourselves, we get on with it. We get on with our own lives. We get on with what we want. We get on being and creating.
You won't need governing.
Oh, no.
Which is interesting, because on a diesel engine, a governor is a restrictor.
Well, yes. That says it all, really, doesn't it? It's just, you know, when you recognize your own power and you're getting on with your own life. And the other thing is when you are working in I say working is the wrong word, when you are functioning in that way, when your life is functioning in that way, you are less likely to be interfered with in ways that you don't want either. Because it's not that, again, it isn't they're not out there in the way that we necessarily think. And that's what I'm saying about our experiences will be different according to our own belief system. So the less restricted your belief system, the more open it is, the less fear you have about being controlled or thinking you're going to be controlled, the freer your life experiences will be. And that's not to say you might not have certain things where you think, oh, I don't like that. And again, it's to, like you said, you know, to learn that it's there to serve you, to learn more about yourself, so that you can find something that probably is just, you know, a limiting belief of some description. It's something that a fear, or it's usually a fear or an emotion of some description that may be hanging on to something, or you're hanging on to something from what you consider to be your past. And that's the other thing. It's not ignoring your past, but it's recognizing what you've learnt from your past and no longer holding on to it as being as it was, or viewing it differently, or having a different way of a different perspective on that. So knowing you've learnt from it and not having the same emotional attachment to what actually happened in that particular experience.
I have one final question for you so we can wrap this up, because you and I could talk a long time, as we always do.
We do.
If there was something you wanted people to take from this, a kind of summary, what would you want people to take from this podcast?
I would love people to be able to be more open to their own intuitions, their own ideas, and recognize that a lot of certain their experiences that they may not be so happy with are to do with beliefs. And this is not saying they're making a mistakes, whatever. These are processes. This is a learning journey. It's all a learning journey. The whole of what we call our life is a learning journey. So to recognize that they're not fixed by any particular experience that they are.
That also implies they're not broken.
They're not broken. They're not making a mistake. Nothing is wrong either with them. And that can sound really harsh for people who may be going through some really tough times. And I don't mean it to be, because it's recognizing that we are all having different experiences for the purpose of learning what we can do here. And I think it's to recognize we can do far more than we've been indoctrinated to believe, and not to feel that we're stuck in any situation.
That's beautiful. That really is beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else you'd like to add to this, or shall we call it a day?
You mean there is so much more. This is to be, these experiences are to be enjoyed where we can, and to be able to have more joy, more fun. And that's again why the indoctrination system tries to suppress us, tries to suppress the fun, and to, for people to be open to being creative, because we are creating new ways of being that we may not have thought were possible. They are possible. And I believe we're in amazing times. These are unprecedented, but in ways that not the same way that we're being told. These are unprecedented. We're learning. We're truly learning. Here we are on, and the more you're open to what's going on, the more amazing experiences we all have, and you'll connect with the people, because that's one of the things in the last few years. People have been disconnected from members of their own family and people they care for, and there's been a lot of sort of separation, and it's time to, I think, try to heal the wounds where possible, and to not be I say not be judgmental in the ways that because that keeps us separated and divided, whereas we all have far more in common than we have differences, and not to be separated by the differences. And recognize that as you're more open, these other people will come into your life that are more in line with where you are, and that's fine. And that's what's happened to me over the last few years. So that's what I'm saying. I can speak from experience from, as I say, the last few years, the amazing people that have come into my life. and it's really, it's just, it is magical to recognize it's magical. And even though it doesn't always feel like it every day, it's just, try to stay open to learning more, recognizing the synchronicities, seeing what presents itself, and looking at opportunities. Doesn't mean you have to take all of the opportunities, but just see the ones you choose. Again, as you say, see what works for you, see what serves.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. And remember as well that you don't have to be a passenger on the bus of your life. You can actually get in the driving seat and drive it.
Well, yes, we are truly in the driving seat, and it's recognizing that we are in the driving seat, and to get out of the idea that we're in the passenger. Yeah.
Quite. Yeah. Well, it's, I think for a lot of people, it goes on autopilot. And
Mm.
they don't realize how much choice they have over it, which again comes back to beliefs and things. So, from my viewpoint, work out what you want and then work out what you need to believe in order to get what you want. You can take every single belief and you can tear it apart because it only has legs of reference. You can start to kick the legs of reference and the tabletop's going to get wobbly and it's going to fall over. And then you can put better ones in place. And then you can have the most amazing experience in your life because now you truly are in charge and you are living and expressing who you really are.
Yes, with a set of beliefs that serves you.
Yeah.
And this isn't about just serving yourself in a selfish way, because when you are serving yourself, you then will inevitably want to help others,
Yeah.
serve others. It becomes a sort of interactive thing. You are serving yourself,
Yeah.
then
Well,
serving others.
you could turn business into a spiritual game. If you come from the right place with the right solutions that serve people, then there's no reason why you can't be well rewarded, which is a review. Then it's a measure of how much service you've been to people. So then it becomes a very spiritual thing because we're contributing back and we're growing at the same time.
Yes.
It's not then your standard lens on business, which is to get you to consume shit you don't want with money you've not got to impress people you don't even like.
Yes, yes, that's a
Yeah,
lot of business. And again, recognizing that this physical reality is part of the spiritual experience. It's not
that's right.
spiritual, isn't somewhere else.
No, it's here.
It is here. I
Yeah.
mean, there's in his book, The Art of Living, Nat Hahn said, that spirituality is, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, but it's how we are in life. It's
Yes.
it's not something outside. It is what we do with it,
Yeah.
what we do with this life, how we express ourselves, how we experience what
Yeah.
our experiences are.
Yeah. Brilliant.
And
Brilliant.
and absolutely, it then ripples. It's stone. So when you looking after yourself, it's like dropping a stone, and it ripples out.
Yeah.
It really does. It
Yeah.
really does. So it's a wonderful experience, and it gives an up and down. Because you don't want flat line. You want some.
Be
You know.
bored stiff.
Yes.
You would, well,
Yes.
stiff being dead.
Well, there is that. So yes, no, and there's no, so it's harmony rather than
Yeah.
balance, I think.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Let's draw a line under now. Let's stay on the line once. So just click end for now. Not end. Click record off. That's the one I want.